From presidential candidate to Broadway producer, Hillary Clinton joined Morning Joe to discuss her latest venture and the upcoming election. Clinton took the opportunity to call out the press for not doing enough to stop Trump.
And I don't think the press has done enough to basically say, okay, the circus is here. You can watch the circus, but let's tell you what that means. Let's talk to people who have a real understanding of how dictatorships evolve.
Some on the right were quick to call out Clinton for saying this next bit while Trump is sitting in a courtroom.
So we need to do a better job of making it absolutely clear that someone who says these things, you know, maybe he wouldn't jail all of his political opponents. One is one too many.
Clinton did also talk about her Broadway musical Suffs, which highlights the women at the heart of the suffragette movement. Clinton said it was an exciting, meaningful project to work on. Here's a glimpse of that musical.
Drink if they've called you an hag. Drink if they've called you a slut or a shrew. Drink if they've called you a crazy hag. Drink if the rumors are true.
Wow. Drink? Weren't the suffragettes involved in getting
temperance
alcohol banned?
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that was the downside of women voting? Sorry.
I guess that was after they got the right.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So I have for a long time thought that there is a real awkwardness in Democratic Party messaging around the we gotta save democracy stuff for a lot of reasons. But one of the most pointed reasons at this time is the fact that Donald Trump is on trial for a number of charges that could land him in jail. And is there any dissonance for Democrats to be arguing that it is kind of fundamentally undemocratic to lock up one's political opponent while they're endeavoring to do exactly that? Now, I would argue, I don't have a blanket feeling that presidents should never have to be accountable for the actions and never go to jail or anything like that. I think the problem is that political leaders tend to be pursued for superficial, very personalized behavior, even if they are violations of the law and they shouldn't be above the law, while the substantive violations, the war crimes that they execute, et cetera, are often ignored because all of the presidents do it, and the new guy persecuting the old guy doesn't want to be held to those same standards.
And can you imagine having the viewpoint that the reason Donald Trump won and might win again is that the mainstream media hasn't been intensely anti-Trump enough? I mean, that's just a crazy perspective. It's a popular one among some liberal commentators. There was a whole kerfuffle earlier this week, I believe, with the New York Times top editor. Maybe I might have talked about it with Jessica on Monday. New York Times editor telling Semaphore, what does the Biden White House want from us? They want us to just be literally the campaign arm of their administration. We're not going to do that. We're talking about immigration issues people care about, including immigration and the economy, in addition to these threats to democracy. But if you look at the polls, threats to democracy is often not the top issue that people say matters to them. So we're talking about it, but we're not talking about it to the satisfaction of the Biden administration. Sorry. And then on social media, it was just liberal media person after liberal media person saying the Times has just abrogated its duty in this most solemn of moments.
Yeah, I feel like I'm Susan Sarandon because this feels like a time warp. She's still stuck in a 2016 era where she's making the same arguments she made back then, which also they were more true than they are today in terms of at least the media's focus on Donald Trump in a way that I think did ultimately help him get taken more seriously as a candidate at a time when he came out of nowhere as like an actual political figure. But even back then, there were also substantive criticisms about how she was running her campaign and how she was failing to address the kinds of issues that Donald Trump was raising that were legitimate ones about her support of NAFTA or not being sufficiently her criminal justice stances and all of the kinds of things that progressives were upset at her about at the time.
Her record on support for war.
Exactly. And she continues to beat that same drum. Now, I will say that there is a lot of media alignment in support of an agenda, even if it's not a candidate. The New York Post front page today screams, "Betrayed, Biden vows to cut off weapons if Israel tries to finish off Hamas." We've covered ad nauseum the reporting from The Intercept that showed that the New York Times internal memos advised their columnists not to use the same kind of language to describe dead Palestinians as they do dead Israelis, and how there's like a 60-to-1 ratio of using certain terms like horrific or murder and things like that when you're talking about one group versus the other, and that has the effect of downplaying the harms against Palestinians, even though there have been much more in number, obviously, over the course of the last 7 months. So there is uniformity when it comes to certain kinds of issues, when it comes to the war machine. And we also see that, I think, with the vote that just took place to preserve Michael Johnson as Speaker of the House, where Democrats came in and enabled him to keep his seat, because I think there's a shared investment in getting these aid packages out the door for both Ukraine and for Israel. But Hillary Clinton's never going to look at that and say, oh, the American people are tired of there being a bipartisan war machine. They're tired of a bipartisan consensus on maintaining the status quo. What we want is someone who can shake it up. And whether that's Donald Trump, whether that's someone like RFK Jr., whether that's someone like Cornel West or Jill Stein, that is why you lost. And that is why Joe Biden it's not looking good for him going into the fall.
And they're tired of hearing from Hillary Clinton on these subjects because she has has reckoned with the reasons for her own loss. She continues to blame Russian interference, all those things. She has said, now this is a crime, and I know that Donald Trump took it farther than anybody else and is now facing the legal consequences for doing that. But she is someone who said he is an illegitimate president, pointing to the interference of Russia, said the thing she said about Tulsi Gabbard and Jill Stein and people like that. She is someone who fundamentally would not accept her own loss of the presidency.
Well, I mean, she fundamentally did accept it because she didn't go to the Capitol
all right. Yes.
and say words that may or may not have encouraged a riot. And more importantly,
well, I know, but
in the 2 weeks before,
she's being interviewed on MSNBC there, which their question for every person, for every political figure is Republican. Would you accept the results of the election? Would you accept the results of the election?
But Hillary Clinton did accept the results of the election and didn't plot for 2 weeks before the inauguration to try to get a fake slate of electors put forward to the House so they can undermine the will of the American electorate and install her as president. So, that is not just an incidental thing to note as a distinction between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
You don't have to. Between Hillary and Trump. I don't think it's a distinction between Hillary and other Republican figures.
What do you mean?
Who, when they're asked, would you accept, or RFK Jr., everybody being asked right now, that's the main question. Would you accept the results of the election if you lost? Would you agree that the other person is the duly elected president? Hers would be like, well, it's illegitimate, but what am I doing about it?
Well, I don't quite understand. I think no one has to ask a question of a person about whether they would accept an election result when they very clearly have accepted the election result. There are material differences between how Donald Trump behaved.
Yes, I agree, but with Donald Trump, but with other people.
Well, because Donald Trump didn't act
like
alone. He has how many co-conspirators?
Well, yeah, and they're being charged too. But
that's
my point
the point.
is, it's treated very selectively as a cardinal sin to not say that I lost fair and square.
Because not only were many of them co-conspirators, many of them also voted against impeaching him for that kind of behavior. So they were made tacit or explicit supportive statements of him challenging the election results in the illegal ways that he did. Not the legal ways where everybody can ask for vote recounts and tallies and wait for the results of that and the legal process to go through, but trying to commandeer the election results. So, I'm loath to defend Hillary Clinton, but there's a reason why they're being treated differently in that respect. But I will say that her tone deafness is so gross. And the fact that it's bookended by this neoliberal fever dream of a musical, I think is why, if I were a Democrat, I would be begging her not to do media appearances, begging her to do only appearances talking about the musical if she's got to do promotion for that and nothing else. Maybe send your daughter out or somebody else involved with it to do promo who's less reviled than you are and who is less kind of responsible for making political judgments in this very politically charged time, and let it go, because you are not helping Joe Biden.
All right, more Rising right after this.